Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Duncombe. I'm a co-chair of Book Sandwich Den, and I would like to welcome you all to our first in-house event of the season. I hope a lot of you were able to make it to the women at the brewery. And coming up, we've got cocktails with George and Martha next week. We've got Yellowface, Secrets of the Sprachar, White Rose, Black Forest. We've got 4 more chances to hear some incredible speakers and either learn something about a read you enjoyed or find a new read that you will enjoy. So we're so glad you're here. Just in case you missed the announcement, we are moving next year to Martin Library. So keep your eyes on the newsletter. But we're shaking things up a little bit with Book Sandwich, and we want to make sure we can reach as many people as possible. But here I am preaching to the choir because you're all here. So you get your gold star for the day. I am delighted to introduce our speaker for today, Larissa McNeil. She is a native of Georgia who grew up in a close-knit family. Oh my goodness, excuse me. As the oldest of 3 with tons of aunts, uncles, and cousins always around. To escape all this noise, as many of us probably have chosen to do, she turned to reading. She took that love with her to Savannah State University, where she majored in English literature, focusing on writing. The AmeriCorps program sent her to Little Rock for a few years. There, she worked with both high school and college students in various areas of literature as a tutor and a mentor. Teach for America brought her here to Tulsa. Thank you, Teach for America, where she taught 8th grade reading in a North Tulsa charter school. After obtaining her master's in teaching and leadership, she decided to pursue other career options in the field. Upon seeing the post for the African American Resource Center, she was delighted to find a position that combined her love of reading, teaching, libraries, and her culture. So, sounds perfect. She didn't hesitate to apply. Now, when she's not learning more about Tulsa and ways to help the community, she's cooking for friends, writing short stories on local patios, and still reading to escape. In December, she will graduate with her master's degree in library information sciences. So without further ado, I will hand over the microphone to the talented Larissa McNeil.
Hello. Yeah, yes, you can hear me. How are y'all? That was an intro, wasn't it? Thank y'all so much for having me. So I'm really excited. This is my first book sandwiched in. Typically, I am in a room by myself with a camera and I'll chat about books just for however long it takes me. So I really tried to make this as organized as I could. So bear with me. So The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. So let's get into it. So that's me at the African American Resource Center at the Rudisill Regional Library. If you've never been, take some time and just go ahead and visit. It's a really cute space. I love it. All right, so the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. So like I said, I tried to be as organized in my ramblings as possible. And so I just kind of rewrote the summary, the back of the book. And I'll kind of go into like, who is James McBride? What has he done? What are some of his thoughts about this book? We'll chat a little bit about the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, and then you get to share your thoughts with me as well. All right, so who is James McBride? So James McBride actually grew up in New York City, went to New York public schools. He is an author. He has written all these incredible novels. I know that our friends of the Rudisill Library are currently reading Deacon King Kong right now. So all of these, The Color of Water was actually made into a film directed by Spike Lee. It's his memoir and about his mom and kind of growing up in New York. But he's also a musician, which is really cool. He has worked with people like Jimmy Scott, who's a jazz legend, has written songs for people like Anita Baker. And I know that I'm young, but I love Anita Baker, so that was really exciting to me. So writing is his jam, if you will. Music, culture, all of that. So getting to read, this was actually my first James McBride book, don't tell anybody. Several of them have been on my book list, but this was the first time I got to actually sit down and read it, and it was a joy to get to read this one first. So this is James McBride. So the Heaven and Earth grocery store, it follows a very diverse cast. There's a lot of characters in it, and that kind of takes you some time to get through. But most of the cast members in this book, the characters are Black or Jewish. And they're Jewish immigrants in this small Pennsylvania town called Pottstown. And McBride himself is Black and Jewish. And his mother was a Jewish woman. His grandmother immigrated from Poland and moved to the United States. His dad was from North Carolina, moved to New York, and they met in Harlem. So I think that this really played a huge part in the creation of this book and in the creation of these characters. And on that next slide, I'll show you some things that he actually said about writing this book and kind of pulling from his own personal history. But I really do think that he did such a great job with this book in kind of showing how these two cultures meet and showcasing their issues with care, and some gravitas and a whole lot of humor, because I did find myself chuckling a bit. So a while ago, he did an interview with PBS, and you can look it up, where he talked about this book and kind of his inspiration. And you can't see this image very well. I got it from the Scattered Books bookstore webpage, but it's kind of a AI generated image of what they think the Heaven and Earth grocery store might look like. Just kind of the people milling around and all of that. So I thought it was really cute to add. But I wanted to I pulled these two quotes from that interview because I really think they showcase what this book did. And if you don't mind, I'll read it. I know I don't typically like to read slides, but I will here. So Pottstown it's my Mayberry. Mayberry was where Andy Griffith was, and everyone was happy, and all the folks were white, and everything was good old America, which is just fiction. Pottstown, my Mayberry, which is Pottstown, is real. It's much more real. It's much more, in my opinion, accurate in terms of its depiction of American life. And I really think we see that in this book. And then he also talked about sort of his inspiration for this book. My grandmother was Jewish, and my mother was Jewish, of course. But my grandmother, I never met. She died in 1942. But and she died, and she was an immigrant from Poland, and she had a very unhappy marriage. And I wanted my grandmother to have a wonderful life. I wanted her to be loved. So I wrote a book in which she was loved, and I made her loved. And so one of our main characters, Chona, which we'll talk about in a second, I'm sure is this grandmother reincarnated, where you can see that she was supremely loved, and was a great part of this area that they lived in. All right, so let's get into the book. So the Heaven and Earth grocery store. So I've kind of interspersed some of the quotes that I really like. And this is just kind of another idea of what he was saying when this is real. So this is from part 1, chapter 3, when two of our main characters are talking. And they say, but the Jews are leaving Chicken Hill. 10 blocks from here is leaving. You know what I mean. Let's go where they are. They're our people. Mashi, I like it here. I grew up in this house. The postman knows where I live. I feel that because when I had to move and change my address, that's just a whole thing. Exasperated, Mashi pointed out the kitchen window towards Pottstown below. Down the hill is America. But Chona was adamant, America is here. And so we really get to see America, right? The people who really make up and live in this place, in this book, in Pottstown. All right, so y'all, I had a little fun with these graphics, so just kind of bear with me. So the novel, it opens in June of 1972, where we see some state troopers find a body in a well in this area called Chicken Hill. So Chicken Hill is our setting. It's a predominantly Black neighborhood in this Pottstown, Pennsylvania, but we have a couple of other cultures interspersed. And before we can learn more about this body, Hurricane Agnes kind of sweeps through and destroys the evidence. So nobody knows who was this. And so we move 47 years back in the past, and we're going to find out who this person is. Once we go back in the past, that's where we meet this cast of super colorful characters that make up this community near the Heaven and Earth grocery store. That's a typo, I'm sorry. This grocery store is owned by Mashi. I've been saying Mashi. That's what I'm gonna keep saying in my head. Mashi and Chona Ludlow. They are our key players, and everybody sort of revolves around them. Mashi is a Jewish immigrant from, I think, Bulgaria. And Shauna is American born, but her dad immigrated to America, Jewish as well. And so I have this little quote right here under this grocery shop, which is very cute. It says, a tiny area of ramshackle houses and dirt roads where the town's Blacks, Jews, and immigrant whites who couldn't afford any better lived. And so I think that line really kind of gives us a picture of what this area is like. It's probably small. It's probably everybody kind of lives. You can probably look out your door and see everybody in these kind of rundown homes. And so that's this area that we're set in. And everybody probably knows everybody, right? And so these are our kind of main cast of characters. There's like 172 characters in this book, but I try to bring like a few of them. And there are a lot of characters, but I think these kind of are the ones that really, really push the story forward. So we have Shauna. She's Jewish. She's a crippled woman. She runs the Heaven and Earth grocery store. The community loves her. Okay. Mashi is her husband. He runs the All-American Dance and Hall Theater, and he often brings in Black and Jewish performers, and even some performers of other nationalities. At one point, I think there's a Afro-Dominican performer that he brings in. And so in this time and in this area, that's not normal, right? You have these segregated areas, these segregated fun time areas where the white entertainment is in this building, the Black entertainment is in this building, the Jewish entertainment is in another building. And Mashi was someone who brought all that together, one, because it made him money. So we also have Nate. He's an older Black man with a mysterious past. He works for Mashi at the theater. Addie is his wife, and she works with Shauna at the grocery store. And then we have Dodo, who is probably my favorite character. He's 12 years old. He is deaf, and he went deaf after a stove blew up in his mom's house. And after his mom passes away, he moves in with Nate and Addie after she dies. And I also have this little quote here about Dodo. Dodo, was smart, sensitive. He saw things other people didn't. Even without his hearing, he understood everything. He was sharp, bright. And he's a great character. I really enjoy him. Oh, that's a little bit off, but so on these next two slides, I kind of have a few of the characters that we meet and then a little bit of explanation of the plot. Like I said, there are several characters and it's kind of hard to keep them all straight because they all have varying degrees of relationships to our kind of main cast. So we learn a little bit about some, a little bit more about others, but they all kind of serve a purpose and really, really, I think, showcasing what this community really is. Okay, so like I said, our main plot seems to revolve around Dodo, and since his mom has passed, he's been living with his Aunt Addie and Uncle Nate. When the state finds out that he's now on his own, and they consider him deaf and dumb, because he's deaf, he must be dumb, they likely don't consider his aunt and uncle fit to take care of them. So they're looking to send him to Penhurst, which is a sanitarium that people have heard horrible things happen at. That seems to be sort of a theme in 1930s, 1940s psychiatric hospitals. At this point, Chona and Mashi have been together for about 12 years, and she's just gotten over a bout of illness. And so in this time, as we're kind of learning the history of these characters, and one of the things that James McBride does is each chapter kind of focuses on a different character. And with each character, we get some of their background, how they got to America, how they got to Pottstown. And then we get to see how they are related in some way or fashion to our main character and what's going to happen with Dodo. So in this time, as we're learning about Dodo and Shona and Mashi and Nate and Addie, we also meet these other characters. And so we get a good look at their histories and their connectedness as a community. Some more characters. And so once they find out that the state, they just say the state, that the state is looking for Dodo. We gotta hide him, right? Like, we can't let them get him because we don't know what's going to happen to him in this place. So we get to Dodo, he's living with the Ludlows in their basement. And as this happens, we get to see way more of our characters, as you can see on the side. And then the reason why Chona is so beloved. She's one of those characters that injustice, that's not her thing. She's gonna talk about it, she's gonna call it out, and she's gonna make sure that everybody around her feels human. And that's why she's so loved by everybody in this community. And so we really, really see that with Dodo. We really see how she dotes on him, how she cares about him. And so one day, Chona is attacked by one of Pottstown's leading members. And when Dodo tries to help, he's captured for his efforts. I think I say efforts 3 times in this slide. And so in the ensuing chapters, we kind of meet characters who either have a hand in the effort or are affected by the effort to help Dodo. So we see a lot of these characters on this side, and from the other slide, kind of, they're either gonna help or they're affected by how that plan lays out. Now, this is probably all of the plot that I'm gonna share. Because this story was so character driven, if I tell you any more plot, I tell you the story, right? So it's one of those books you're gonna have to read if you haven't. So this is one of the quotes that I pulled, and I really liked it because it really speaks to sort of what these two cultures are kind of dealing with in this space. So this quote says, it's from part 2. They move slowly like Fugayers, wanderers seeking a home in Europe, or Iru West African tribesmen herded off a ship on a Virginia shore to peer back across the Atlantic in the direction of their homeland one last time, moving toward a common destiny, all of them, Isaac, Nate, and the rest, into a future of American nothing. It was a future they couldn't quite see, where the richness of all they had brought to the great land of promise will one day be zapped into nothing. The glorious tapestry of their history boiled down to a series of 10-second TV commercials, empty holidays, and sports games filled with the patriotic fluff of red, white, and blue, the celebrants cheering the accompanying dazzle without any idea of the horrible struggles and proud past of their forebears who had made their lives so easy. So this is kind of, I think James McBride does a glimpse into the future, if you will, and how all of the hard work that it seems like these people do to acclimate themselves to the American landscape, almost in the future boils down to just these commercials, right? To a month for this group, to a week for this group. And so we really kind of see how America assimilates them, if you will. Okay, so let's talk themes. I was an English teacher, so I love themes. Because why do we read books if not for the themes? So one of the things that I pulled from this book is justice. So much, the idea of justice, I think, is so prominent. And in a neighborhood like Chicken Hill, where you have to the others, the lowest of the low, justice is really hard to come by, right? So in part 3, Nate says to Isaac, and Isaac is Mashi's cousin who immigrated over to America with him. When Isaac offers money and a lawyer to help Dodo, he says, "The law in this land is what the white man says it is, mister, plain and simple." And so in 1930s, 1940s America, we know that the laws are still being created, right? We know that discrimination is kind of built into the literal fabric of this country, and power speaks. Oftentimes, especially in this neighborhood, they don't see justice because the people who are whiter or more money get to be the victims regardless of what happened. So Chona is a big proponent of justice. A lot of the Jews who have left Chicken Hill still really respect her because she continues to speak about the injustices that people all over feel, but particularly the Jewish folks. She writes to the newspapers. She says it out loud. She does not care that people, kind of come back at her. She's like, no, this is wrong. She reads the books about justice, and as a woman in this time, right? That's so uncommon. But Chana was doing that. And one of the big things that she really, really spoke out against was that one of Pottstown's leading doctors was a Ku Klux Klan member and very freely marched, and like just kind of like, this is what I'm doing. And nobody had anything to say. And she was very opposed to that. And so she was one of the people who wouldn't go see him. And nobody understood why. It was kind of like, well, he just marches sometimes. So she was very against justice. And we see in the situation with Dodo how justice sometimes has to be taken in ways that, do not always align to whatever law that these people have decided is the law today. Sorry, y'all, I did have a lot of fun with these little graphics. You can't see this one as well. I'm sorry, I didn't realize how it looked. But survival is another theme, and I think it's a really important theme in a book like this. Chicken Hill is a poor neighborhood. In the 30s and 40s, we see this, and by the 40s, it has started to decline, but early 1900s, we see this influx of immigrants from all over to the United States. And a lot of them are rushing to the northern parts of the United States. And so in a place like Chicken Hill in Pennsylvania, you've got a lot of folks who are already living there and a lot of folks coming. And so there's jobs are a dime a dozen. And because there are so many people, the employers can pay them nothing, because if they don't get the job, they got 12 more people down the street ready to work. So in this space, we see many residents who are day laborers. They're maids, they're laundresses, they work in factories or in mills. That's just their characters. They're characters like Fatty, who had several jobs. Fatty owned a juke joint. He was a factory worker. He sold hamburgers out of the juke joint in the daytime. He was gonna make his money any way possible. But in a place like this, you have to, because one wrong word could get you fired, because they had that leverage. And so there was very little running water, no real sewage system. People lived in ramshackle homes, or they lived above where they worked. And so you see people kind of doing whatever they need to do to survive. And a lot of times that survival looks like ignoring some of the injustices because you just needed to get through your day. And if you were so focused on everybody else, you couldn't do what you needed to do. And so even before the story that we read in this book, you have characters like Mashi and Nate, who both grew up in less than stellar circumstances, and we see how that drives what they do in present day. Mashi and his cousin Isaac, they immigrated from Bulgaria, and so just coming, and I think they were fairly young teenagers when they came over. So imagine being a teenager, just you and your cousin trying to make it from Bulgaria to the United States with nothing. And then Nate, who is a great character as well, he lived in North Carolina before moving north. And he had to deal with an abusive father and some criminal history. And so we see how that survival sometimes make certain characters more stoic, or even some characters more kind of happy-go-lucky because they're just trying to get through their days. And like I said, the main goal is to live regardless. And so sometimes that looks like looking the other way when bad deeds happen, or committing bad deeds, like attempting to break a 12-year-old out of a sanitarium. And this is kind of my final theme that I kind of came across: community across cultures. And I think it's one of the most important ones. Like I said, James McBride is biracial, and I think he did such a great job of kind of blending his two cultures to kind of show us the types of people that exist in these spaces. The neighborhood is predominantly Black, but there are a lot of Jewish characters and a lot of a few Italian characters too that live in this area. Both of these communities are kind of ostracized by the American-born white people. So the American white people don't like Black people because they're Black, and then the American-born white people don't like the immigrants because in the same vein that we get today, they're coming over, they're taking the jobs, they're destroying the fabric of the country. We see that in this book too. And so they're kind of cast off to the side. they do their own thing in Chicken Hill. But because of that, we see these characters band together in a number of moments. We see them support Chona in her sick moments. Chona at this grocery store makes no money because Chona is often supplying groceries on credit, free for many of the residents. And we also see them coming together to help Dodo. Mashi and Nate are close, this Jewish man and this older Black man. They're close. Chona's childhood best friend was a woman named Bernice, who was her neighbor, who was a Black woman. And Addie is now her best friend. And when Dodo goes to Pennhurst, he meets Monkey Pants, who is a white patient, and they grow close. So we really see how survival and how justice can bring these communities together and really showcase how at the end of the day, they're all just humans trying to live. And so there was a quote that I messed up, and I'm sorry, that I did not put on this slide, and I want to read it to you because I think it's important to kind of help sum up. And I thought I switched the slides, but I did not because I'm a little bit technologically illiterate. And so one of the things that they talk about in this book, and one of the reasons I think that they had to survive and they had to fight for their own justice and they had to build community when the larger world around them told them that they did not, it's because of the discrimination that was so apparent and so rampant in this space. A lot of times we think about how people come north from the South, especially African Americans, Black people, because they thought that going north was going to kind of absolve, like kind of get rid of that racism that was so apparent down South. And as a person from Georgia, I saw some of that. But James McBride says, the difference was that the white man in the South spoke his hatred in clear, clean, concise terms, whereas the white man in the new country hid his hatred behind stories of wisdom and bravado, with false smiles of sincerity and stories of Jesus Christ and the other nonsense that he tossed around like confetti in the Pottstown parade. And I really like that quote because I think it really encapsulated part of what James McBride wanted to share by setting these characters in this place, because some of the characters even found more joy going back down South. But because of the way that the more money than the whiter characters in Pennsylvania treated the people of Chicken Hill, they really, really had to band together. And I think James McBride did a beautiful job of showing how even when the world says, you look like that, so you're not supposed to talk to me, that's not how real people operate. When you are in spaces together, real people get to know one another. You have no choice but to get to know your neighbor when your neighbor has something that you need. And when you don't have much, all you have, right, are your neighbors. And so you really get to band together, you really get to see humanity in a way that the world would ask you not to. And so I think James McBride did a beautiful job of that. And so that is the Heaven and Earth grocery store. I hope I didn't ramble too much. So I will take any questions or thoughts. I think they did. Do I agree? Yeah. And I'm a character driven person. Like, but you like a book with plots, but I like people. That's why I do the work that I do. That's why I work in the library. That's why I used to be a teacher. I like people. And so I like commentary on people as well. And so I think this book does a good job of showing how the lives that people lived then does still influence the way that we live now. I think a lot of the themes are still prevalent today. He had a lot of commentary on, like I said, like that quote about how in the future these diverse and these, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? These very rich cultures get kind of condensed into these little 10-second spots to these celebrations of 1 month or 1 week or whatever you have, of this idea that immigrants ruin the fabric of America. These ideals are still true, right? However many years later, we are still seeing some people who think this way. And so I think that a book like this is just a beautiful commentary on the work that we still have to do as a country. So yeah, I do think that it being the 2023 Book of the Year was a smart choice. Yeah.
I wonder, your thoughts on the, you know, when you kind of describe this book at a surface level, it's like a community comes together and, you know, like, spoiler alert, the bad guys get it in the end, you know, and like the good guys win. Yeah. It sounds kind of like a Hallmark movie, and yet it's like really, despite the sort of like saccharine themes, it's like very weighty and sad. And so how do you think McBride, because I have a hard time explaining to people when I tell them about this book, how like it sounds really cheesy, but it's actually kind of life changing. Yeah. I mean,
Oh, that's a good one, because I don't know yet. So for people in Zoom land, the question was, how do you describe this book in a way that makes it seem deeper than sort of that surface level, saccharine sweet, book that it can seem when you're not able to get into the plot. Ooh. That's a good question too. Why do you even have to?
there are people who would like to read the We Happy, Bad Guys Lose, Good Guys Win, but there are also people who would like to read more
Something with, yeah.
social issues.
And two things can be true at one time. If you ask my friends, I say that all the time, and they quote me jokingly all the time that two things can be true at one time. So you do have this book that is on its surface a book where you learn the bad guys very early on. You watch their demise. It is lovely. It is sweet. But and I think that's because, like I said in the answer to the last question, it's a book about people. And people are deep, and people are flawed, and people have trauma, and that trauma influences the way that they respond to situations. It influences the decisions that they make. And so in this book, yes, on our surface, we get just sort of this very almost arcal story, you know, the plot diagram that you learn when you're in school. You get that, but in between, you get the meat of a community of people who are living. And living is messy, and living is scary, and it's happy, and it's joyful. So you get all of that. So I would, use adjectives. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Yes, ma'am. That's true. And so Zoomland people, one of our attendees had a thought about how science is really doing more research and showing us more how trauma lives in our bodies and it's passed down generationally in a way that we don't even always understand. And sometimes we act a fool, as my mama would say, and don't know why. And I think that's so true. And I think that tends to be why we get to where we are in the world today, where the hard work that our ancestors all across the board put in to kind of get us here, and that caused trauma for them, right, in various ways. And so that lives and it exists today in the way that we are interacting with each other, and a lot of times, unfortunately, in not so great ways. Yes, ma'am.
Story to share.
Oh.
Also think that it's like in the community.
Mm-hmm.
We had a friend that was a medic helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and when they went into a really hot area and they were trying to get out, the pilot was Jewish.
Mhm.
And he said, is there anybody who speaks Yiddish? Because I can't talk English because they're calling it too knowledgeable. And somebody came on the line and said, yeah, we got a guy here that speaks Yiddish. And guided them out of the hotspot back to the boat. And so when the pilot got out, he said, who's this guy that spoke Yiddish? I need to meet him. And he said, well, he's the base commander. Tell him how.
Of course, House speaks Yiddish.
He was raised in South Bronx with Jamaican parents,
Mhm.
but worked in a Jewish grocery store for many years. He learned Yiddish.
Wow.
And often, when he was asked to speak, he would address them in Yiddish.
Yeah,
Which is, I think, such a neat
it is.
story.
It is a good story. And that's what happens when we intermingle. You learn about each other. We can pick up on each other's cultures, I think, in a really beautiful way. Yes, ma'am.
With so many characters. One of the things there were prominent characters, but the book had a multitude of characters.
I just wrote them down. Like every time I got to a new character, I just write them down. Cause I can't even remember names in real life. I should have, I did it. I just did kind of a list and was kind of like, okay, main, cause once you get through it, you kind of see, I think, who the main characters are. But like kind of those side characters who matter. Yeah. But yeah. That was just a number, but it's, no. That was an exaggeration, but it did feel like that. Like once you got to part 3 and yet another character, I was like, oh goodness, I thought we had met them all. All right. Any others? Yeah. Deacon King Kong. Mm-hmm. I am. If you are a person who has a first good book, I want to read every single thing you've ever read. So now I'm excited to read every single thing he's ever written. Because I think, and like I said, I'm a character person. I know that some people who are more plot driven may not love this book because it's low on plot, heavy on character. But for me, I just love people and I like people's stories because I'm nosy. So I like to hear what people have to say about their lives. And this was the way to do that. So I am excited to read that one. All right, I think that's it. If there are no other questions, thank y'all so much. This is beautiful.